about sludge. So I've heard it come up a couple times, just in passing today. People are talking about sludge, and I'm kind of confused about sludge. On one hand, you could think of it, is it an anti-nudge? Is it a barrier? Or is it somehow a nudge for bad? I've kind of heard people talking about it all those different ways, and just wanted to get some thoughts about sludge.
So here's my preferred usage. Imagine a 2x2 table where we have good and bad on one axis.
And good is how you define it?
Good is that we think it's an outcome that makes the people affected better off. So taking their medicine, going to the gym, doing better in school. We can have another discussion about how we know or don't what we should be encouraging. But so good and bad as decided by something. The other dimension is, you think of it as grease and sandpaper, WD-40 and friction. So easy, hard. Okay, so we have the 2x2. So lots of nudges are in the good, easy cell, right? And in fact, those are the most reliable. We know if we change the default, it has a 50% effect size. So that cell is clear.
But couldn't you think of as a default as actually a sludge barrier? That is, it's stopping me from making a change. So.
You're giving me a headache. Double negatives. There are no double negatives allowed in this interview.
No, but you can think of it as a opt out as a barrier, right? A barrier from change.
Yeah.
But that
yes.
would still be a nudge.
That would still be a nudge. So, as you know, I always sign nudge for good. So it's not that all nudges are good. And you can make it easy to do the wrong thing. So when airlines pre-check and recommend the flight insurance, that's nudging for evil. Okay, now sludge, I prefer to reserve sludge as the bottom corner of friction for evil. So voting rules that make it harder for people to vote, long lines,
complicated insurance forms.
Yeah, and subscriptions that are easy to join and impossible to get out of. I learned about a new one today that you can quit, but only for a month, and then they re-enroll you. Thank you very much for that one.
Yeah, and my gym, you have to send a certified letter to the gym to quit. Otherwise, they just keep charging you. That would be a good sludge.
Right.
Yeah.
So.
Although, wouldn't it be good to keep me going to the gym?
Right. Now, if Katie and Angela do it, then it's sludge for good. But so friction can be good. So if you push the cashews away, if you have cooling off periods, if you the being a man thing that the Chicago, you guys all know about that, right?
Becoming a man.
Becoming a man, yeah. Is basically taking primarily black Chicago males and teaching them to take a deep breath before pulling a trigger. I'm obviously simplifying it. So in lots of cases, if people just stop and thaw, that would be better. And, in some states, but not Nevada, you can't get married on the spur of the moment. That's probably also useful. So I would rather reserve sludge for this specific friction for bad purposes and come up with some other terms for those off-diagonal elements. It's a term I coined, but I coined it on Twitter, so I don't think it's citable. Although there is a piece in Science, so maybe that makes it citable. So, but that's the clearest terminology.
Yeah.
That, and I've been trying to write a short article with Cass about this, but
He's too busy writing yet another book.
he's 3 books on it, so.
So I'm interested in your thoughts about retirement savings, because this is obviously an area that you've worked on a lot with programs like Save More Tomorrow. And I just want to know, do you continue to be interested in this topic? What kind of new areas do you think we should be studying in terms of encouraging savings? Or is that even the right question when it comes to retirement?
So first, one point about retirement saving. As everyone in this room knows, my alleged best friend claims that my best quality is my laziness. So my interest in retirement saving, which started before I was old, was not entirely based on the fact that it was an easy problem to solve, but it wasn't unrelated. And if you think
there were no double negatives.
no, that only applies to Linda.
Okay.
So if you think of the 3 big changes to most 401k plans, they are automatic enrollment, so Save More Tomorrow, automatic escalation, and then sensible default investment vehicles like target date funds. So if somebody is a complete idiot and just doesn't do anything, they will end up with a decent outcome in a well-designed plan. They'll be ramped up to a respectable saving rate and invested sensibly and automatically rebalanced. So one of those things that all have in common is set it and forget it. Now, think about all the things that we talked about today where the results were disappointing or small. What do they all have in common? There's no set it and forget it. I've always said there's no eat less tomorrow.
Or you don't have to sign up for retirement every month. If every month you had to re-choose your retirement.
Yeah, or imagine every
allocation.
day.
Yeah.
So at the University of Chicago, we had a change. We had 2 plan administrators, and they sensibly had a bidding war between the 2 and picked one. And that meant if your funds were in one of them, you had to switch, and they picked the closest substitute that they could find, and that was the default. And then let things happen. The last time I asked, somewhere around 3 or 4% of people have done anything since this. And this is University of Chicago faculty. So we wouldn't want, and there are other things like in open enrollment, the default healthcare plan is same as last year, which is good because the other default in open enrollments are back to zero. You would not want back to zero on healthcare plans, or half the faculty would have no health insurance. So, these problems like getting people to exercise or lose weight, all of us who have less energy than Katie and Angela know that those problems are hard. And we know that even really good tools won't necessarily work. So we've had alarm clocks for a long time. And you don't have to set it, or you can turn it off, or you can hit the snooze button. There was that annoying clocky. So everybody know what that is? I mean, it's the alarm clock that if you hit the snooze button more than once, it jumps off the table and runs around the room and makes noise. Now, I don't think they've sold many of these. Cass bought one for his teenage daughter, and she threw it at him. So,
Seems right.
right? So, we've had self-control problems going back to Adam and Eve. I blame it all on Eve.
You would.
Yeah. And, right, all of literature, going back to the Bible and Odysseus, right? These are old problems, and if there were easy solutions, we would have found them. So I put behavioral change into two categories. Ones we can fix once and forget it, and ones that require continued attention. First group are easy, and we can solve them with choice architecture, not just improve them. We can come pretty close to an A- solution just with setting things up right. That doesn't work at the cafeteria. We can put the salad bar in front of the burgers and pizza, but people do walk around it. So those problems are going to be harder. I think the most depressing findings today are Kevin's. And the reason is, just think about this. You've had a heart attack. You almost died. And if you have one heart attack, you're likely to have another one, right? It's the risk of a second heart attack is higher if you had one. So you'd think these patients would be pretty motivated. And all they have to do to reduce their risk substantially, big effect size, is take a couple pills every morning. Not that hard. And most of them don't have side effects, do they? Statins don't have side effects. I don't know what the other, any blood thinners, but anyway, I don't think for most people their side effects are big. Is that a fair statement?
The perception of the prevalence of side effects is much higher than the actual side effect risk, but the side effect profile is relatively good.
Yeah. So you would, if we described this, I said, look, you have some disease and it could recur, but all you have to do is take these 3 pills every morning, and they're free, and they don't make you sick. You would think everybody would do that. Then we know less than half, even when it's free. It's pretty shocking. And my guess is that the solution to that problem and most similar problems will be technology. Either pills that you only take once, or every 6 months. And if you have a heart attack, you have an appointment every 6 months and they give you a shot, or
Something that puts it
something
into
they
your
put
body.
in your body. My understanding is that the technology now exists for something in your body that will measure your blood sugar and adjust it. Not that it's ready for market, but that's not science fiction. So now notice that's not behavior change, right? That's set it and forget it. My prediction is that that's the future of much medicine, and that the kind of stuff we do on that front is going to be second order. I hope I'm wrong, but I hope the technology comes faster. But and it's not because the people in this room aren't brilliant and energetic; it's that the problems are hard. And so I work on easier problems.
Well, does that mean that you think we're done with retirement savings? That's
No,
kind of a problem
no.
that's solved, and
No, so
no
there's
team?
there's a harder problem, and it's called the decumulation problem. So when you reach a certain age, that you're far
Like
from.
your age, for example.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
One.
right.
That's one.
He warned me this is a repeated game. So.
Yeah. So yeah, when you reach a certain age, the theory says, right, economic theory of saving, life cycle hypothesis, you save up and then you retire and you spend down the proceeds. Now, that second part is way harder. It's harder cognitively. I mean, the problem, writing down the math, is harder because if you think about the saving up problem, you could have a target retirement age, say 65.
And you know what that is.
And
It's a
you
little
know,
harder
right,
to get,
that's a number. And if you die before that, good. If you manage to get there and you haven't saved enough, you can work a couple more years, which will increase the pile of money and decrease the number of years it has to last. So, I mean, and we know we've kind of fixed some of it. The reverse end, people are used to living on a budget. Most Americans pay, if you want the best consumption function, in econ speak, it's C equals Y, meaning people spend what they make. For most Americans, that model of consumption works very well. And so they're used to living on an allowance. And then all of a sudden, they're in some new world where they have a pot of money that sounds bigger than any amount of money they've ever had. And they're going to live some amount of time. And now, okay, they get through the first year and they got to recompute. And how's your health holding up? If it's holding up well, you better spend less. If you get sick, go on a cruise. So this is a problem very much in the air. There's actually a bill in Congress that is meant to address parts of this. It actually passed the House with 400 votes, which is pretty shocking. Which means it has some good stuff and some bad stuff. So that's how you get 400 votes. But I won't go into the details of it. The part that relates to this is they're trying to make it easier for companies to include annuities in the plan. Because people with pensions that are paid out in an annuity love them, but people with DC plans never buy annuities. Now, it's hard to square those two things. We had a strike by the Chicago Symphony this spring, and it was precisely about this issue. The management wanted to get rid of their DB pension plan. The orchestra went on strike. Somehow I got roped into it. And what they were offering, I thought, was better than the old plan. And, there was somebody that was the head of the union whose analysis was DB good, DC bad. And it was like over his dead body, were they gonna lose this? And, they finally came to their senses. But, so this decumulation stuff, and given that people don't want annuities, there will be lots of room for innovation of other ways of giving people an allowance. And so that's something I'm thinking about.
Yeah, it sounds like an area that would be ripe for behavioral science.
And I'm the right age. Go ahead.
Exactly. Well, it's one of these things that you're deciding every day about consumption, and so targeting at that daily period would be right for
Yeah,
this.
I mean, so a simple thing that you can do if you had all of your money in one retirement account, you could have them in year one give you a monthly check and then adjust it the next year according to various things.
Yeah, so you kind of choose the rule once and then it's implemented. Yeah.
But there are other solutions. There's this old method called a tontine that my former student Suzanne Shu is very interested in. Basically, you get a bunch of people together. It's a French thing, and it's not to be confused with a pastry. It's not a pastry. You get, say, 1,000 people together. They pool all their money, and they divide it up evenly among everybody that's left living. And that's a way of solving what the actuaries call longevity risk.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's the hot topic in retirement.
Yeah, cool. Well, I'm actually a little bit afraid to ask this next question, but I'm just going to go right ahead.
Go for it.
So there's a recent paper that came out. You already know what I'm going to say. By a couple of my colleagues at Carnegie Mellon in Nature Climate Change that talked about, their experiments were about how a nudge could crowd out preferences for alternatives like a carbon tax. And I'm just wondering if Professor Thaler,
walking out of the process.
I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts about that paper.
I'm sure he does.
Or maybe Danny, you want to answer this question.
So, I mean, look, we know George is the greatest living psychologist among all economists. And that's meant to be a compliment, right? I mean, there was no insult in there anywhere, I believe. And so he should know enough to know that those experiments they ran are just like the compromise effect. If you give people an alternative, would you like a carbon tax? And say 70% say yes. Oh, would you like a carbon tax or a recycling program? Well, some people will take what they think is the middle option, but there's no evidence whatsoever that that's how policy works. Because if it did, everyone in this room should be applauding Trump's removal of all the environmental regulations. Because by George's logic, that increases the chance of a carbon tax. Now, maybe it does, but, I think, maybe it was Kevin or somebody said that what we should do is everything we know how to do. So in the chapter on climate change in Nudge, the first paragraph says, the first thing we should do is have a carbon tax. Because basic economics says, get the prices right. Start with that. Now, there's a bunch of other stuff you could do. So you can have smart thermostats. That'll help. You could have thermostats that ding when it's really hot out and you're spending a lot of money, or they turn red, right? There are lots of things that we could do that will have 2% effect sizes, but they're in a good direction. O-Power is not big, but it's costless. Is there anybody against O-Power? Yes, George Lowenstein.
Really?
Well, that's what the paper says. It's O-Power is the reason why we don't have a carbon tax. That line does not appear in that paper, but it is the obvious conclusion. If anybody thinks I'm being unfair, at some point you guys will rescue me from Linda, and feel free to defend that paper.
But so you don't feel strongly about it?
No.
Okay. All right, so I have one more question, and then we can take some questions from the audience. So nudge and behavioral science has had an impact on policy and legislation. It's had an impact in business. We've seen it had an impact in politics and political campaigns. And I'm wondering what the next frontier is. Is there a nudge for personal relationships? So
maybe you and I can get along?
Maybe. I'm just wondering.
I think that falls into the category of, there's no set it and forget it.
I'm kind of just wondering.
So I have an answer. And I was actually here a month or two ago at a conference that my student Kate Massey organized on people analytics. And here's something that I've been saying there and elsewhere. I think there's a big revolution in business that will come in the domain of human resources. And so here's two observations. One is, I've never been in a company where people thought the strongest department was human resources. Has anybody ever been in the company? So, there's an endogeneity problem here. We don't know whether smart people are not attracted to human resources, or firms don't assign smart people to human resources, but nobody from HR has ever become CEO, is my guess. But now let me contrast that. I'm friends with a guy called Daryl Morey, who's the general manager of the Houston Rockets, which is a team that is at the cutting edge of analytical thinking in the NBA. So I asked him how many people he has working for him. Now, general manager, what does that mean? He's in charge of figuring out who the players are that they're gonna field. He's head of HR. And I asked him how many people he has working for him doing analytics. 15. He has a workforce of 12. Right? So 15 kids running regressions to hire the best 12 people. Now, I've been at companies that have 1,000 employees, and they don't have a single person that is thinking about this stuff in an analytical way. And by analytical, I don't mean necessarily hiring by algorithm. I mean all the tools that we collectively have could be being used to hire people better, to get them into jobs that they would be good at, to train them to do those jobs better, and all kinds of other things. And that's where I see one domain in the private sector. Where now, more quickly, what you'll see, and what you're already seeing, is there are armies of people being hired to do A/B testing in the largest economics department in the world is now at Amazon. 200 economists. So you'll see a lot of people with the same skill set going to work for firms that sell via the internet, but that's marketing. And I think, and it's not a revolution. I think there's a revolution to be had in human resources.
Well, I think you'll be happy to know that before I came here, I actually spent the last couple of days at Dallas at Deloitte University. And I was in a team with the top HR people from all their global geographies all over the world. And within 5 minutes of that 2-day meeting, I heard the word choice architecture used in a sentence correctly. I heard nudge, I heard loss aversion, I heard endowment effect. It was actually kind of amazing. So I think maybe it's coming. I certainly saw it. I saw it in the last couple of days. So
That's a good sign.
Yeah.
Well, I think there's a lot to do, and for students, I think there's stuff to do there that is potentially revolutionary. It's risky, but that's good.
I'd like to open it up to questions.
Yeah, Max has a question.
So I'm old enough to remember about 30 years ago, before we knew that index funds were a good idea, Dick actually told us academics, similar groups as this, that we should buy index funds, quit thinking about stock picking, and put most of our money in stocks. And a lot of us are wealthier because he put us on the right path a long time ago. But there was an easy solution back then if we listened to you. And as I heard you describe the spending or the annuity issue, I didn't hear a sort of an easy solution, and I'm unclear why the market hasn't developed an interesting, easy solution. And many people still see many of the providers of annuities as suspect.
Yeah,
And so why hasn't the University of Chicago or Harvard solved that
I
problem?
mean, so what this bill, it's called the Secure Act. And I don't know what those letters stand for, but one of the provisions is to give plan sponsors, meaning your employer, a safe harbor, meaning they can't be sued, if they want to include an annuity inside the plan. So, suppose Harvard did that, it could end up working more like the pension you would have at the University of California, where it's a defined benefit. I have been talking to people in the Labor Department off and on for 10 years about how to do that. The problem is, the obvious way to do it would be to say, well, if you hire an insurance company to provide the annuity that's rated AAA, then you get a safe harbor. Well, there are two insurance companies that meet that. And then there's the problem that rating agencies didn't exactly serve us well in the financial crisis. See my favorite movie for evidence about that. So annuities are complicated, and there's lots of variations on them. The ones that economists think are best, so the index fund of annuities is not liked by anybody. It's equivalent, so economists also tell you, and I probably have told you, get the biggest deductible that you can get. So the best annuity, the smartest annuity, one that I would recommend for you, if you weren't already rich enough that you don't have to worry about it, is to buy an annuity that starts at age 85. Now we've made the problem way easier, right? You just have to last to 85 or not, and either way you're covered. But people don't like that because they say, oh, I plunked down, $100,000 to buy that, and if I die, I lose it. Yeah. If you buy life insurance and you live, you could collect nothing, If you buy fire insurance and your house doesn't burn down, you get nothing. But that's the way people think about annuities. And so there's no one-liner, sorry. You'll have to call me every year and I'll tell you what to buy.
So I don't actually recall the conversation where you told Katie and me not to do it. So
No, there's an email.
Yeah, I know. I just realized that I was obviously, selectively ignoring your advice. But you are a grandfather, and I think that grandparents and parents, educators, healthcare providers. I mean, I wonder what so technology and set it and forget it are definitely easier. But there is this project of basically building up human capacities that seems to me unavoidable. And maybe there is no role for behavioral science because I don't know, it's just too complicated. But as a parent and a grandparent, then but it's also somebody who studied human behavior for his whole life. What do you see then as what would be the prescriptive recommendation?
I did my homework over there, and when you read my assignment, you'll see that my suggestion for the big school project is to pick the easiest problem you can think of and try that. And if you don't succeed at that, quit.
Yeah, no.
There are things I think that we know. I mean, the email I sent you guys, or maybe it was a conversation I had with Katie.
You did tell us this.
But I said what you're trying is really, really hard, and I think the other problem was that Katie mentioned in her opening remarks is that the financial incentive stuff were way too small to have any effect. Now, that was just the budget you had. But you know, I've had various friends try to quit smoking. And we had a secretary in our group who wanted to quit smoking. And the whole group sort of pooled, you know, this is the behavioral science group at Booth. So we had a lot of human capital there. And we put every idea together. And I told him to start January 1, even before you wrote your paper. And first thing I told her is, you have to want this. So you come back when you're ready. And she may have picked January 1. But then we had all kinds of rewards and stars and all kinds of stuff. And I offered her frequent flyer miles for a trip to Hawaii. Now, she went gaga over that. Cigarettes in Chicago today cost $12 a pack. $12 a pack. 6 weeks of cigarettes gets you to Hawaii. 3 months gets you there first class. Right? So the financial incentives are there. Now, you know, I was doing some mental accounting magic, and that can be quite powerful, but there's no way that paying people 50 cents to go to the gym is going to work. We just know that's not going to work.
To be fair, it did. It actually did.
You squinted.
No, it significantly increased gym attendance. It was just that
Not more than the.
it just wasn't, so I'm like, correction for the record. So 75% of our interventions significantly increased gym attendance. Which didn't last after the intervention period ended.
Over
And-
the no treatment. Yeah, right. Which is
Yeah, but they worked. They just didn't, we had all these ideas, like, I know I can do better if I add another ingredient, and the added ingredients added nothing. But actually the incentives did work. 21 cents did make people go to
Okay,
the gym.
so
Hawthorne effects work. I
We
mean,
had a placebo control.
yeah,
all right, so let me make a constructive comment. Because I don't want, we'll have this at the bar or something. There was a paper I saw last week by Susan Donarski, is that how you say her name? A very nice program to attract smart, underprivileged kids to the University of Michigan. And they used the same approach I used in designing Save Water Model, which was put everything I knew into it. So it was glitzy. They guaranteed them full tuition if they were accepted. It would have been better to guarantee them acceptance, but they couldn't get permission to do that. But otherwise, they used every trick they had. So, I mean, this is hindsight, possibly foresight. Because I don't remember the conversation we had any better than you guys do. But, I mean, what I would try on Jim's round 2 would be one trial that does everything with high stakes. And see if that moves the meter and sticks, because it becomes either a habit or a ritual.
You want us to
Depending
have
on-
the stomping and the clapping and the intervention?
Depending on which order you do the machines, I think. So yeah,
what
I
was the
think
result in that paper when
it's like a huge
It's
effect.
a huge effect.
40% effect size, something like that, Phil? Yeah. So, Yeah. And the effect sizes are bigger the further away you go from Ann Arbor, which kind of makes sense because if you live in Detroit or Ann Arbor, you know about the University of Michigan. If you're up in the UP, you know, it's like a foreign country down there. So you know, I did something amusing at the end of that workshop, which was so this was the applied micro workshop. It's not the behavioral science workshop. And I raised my hand at the very end and said, I'm not sure whether this is allowed, but I wish to give the author an unsolicited compliment. That I think it was a really good idea to throw everything at it, not try one at a time. I didn't get a ruling as to whether my comment was or was not allowed.
I mean, it depends on what your goal is. If your goal is some basic science to learn about mechanisms, then some things are
Correct.
barreled. And for the more junior people in the audience, you may not want to go that way, as
You're-
that sort of basic science is more rewarded when you're a junior person versus a senior.
Absolutely. I mean, point well taken. And in fact, I added, I'm not sure, although a colleague of mine said he was going to solicit this paper at a good journal. So, but look, if we want to make people healthier, certainly you could get this kind of paper published in a medical journal or in Science. Whether you could get it published in the AER or, God forbid, JPSP, that's another story. But I think there are lots of places to get stuff published. And, you know, the field is probably not the place to be fine-tuning our understanding of the levers of self-control. I think we can probably do that in the lab and then take our collective wisdom and design the biggest punch we can deliver and see if that works. And if it doesn't, then we either declare the problem unsolvable or find people that are even smarter and more energetic than you guys, which I don't think is possible.
Other questions? How are we doing on time?
5 minutes.
Okay, great.
Oh, yes, 5 minutes.
Yeah, Tom.
I wonder if you consider this a fair representation of the ledge world.
Talk a little louder.
Yeah. Is this a fair summary of the evolution of nudging? That is to say, you present to a group like this, we've got these behavioral change problems, and everyone here, at least everyone here I know, does a Lewinian analysis. What's preventing the behavior that you want that lets you get rid of those barriers? The way we focus on are things that make the behavior hard, effortless. So let's make it easier.
Right.
But as a social psychologist, one of the biggest barriers is a social barrier, fear of embarrassment. People don't want to go there because it's embarrassing. People don't want to be identified as a medicine taker, so you don't take your medicine on vacation. You don't want to have other people see you take it. People are embarrassed to go to the gym because, in Greg's terms, do I fit in here? So do I have these kinds of body circulatory systems and so on? And we cover embarrassment a little bit implicitly by the kind of marriage between nudging and norms, but have we focused on it at the detailed level? Is that a fair characterization?
No, I think it's a great comment. And it might be particularly applicable in the schools setting. Lots of smart African American kids said their biggest problem was that you were considered, I don't know what the adjective would be, but uncool if you were a good student. It wasn't the thing to do. And, you know, it's the opposite of the environment most of us were lucky enough to grow up in, where going to college was considered a foregone conclusion. So, you know, gyms for fat people are probably a good idea. That if you don't look good in Lulu, then you better go to this other gym where you won't look any worse than anybody else. That's a free startup for anybody who wants it. You need discreet entrances.
Colin, I think you had a question too.
Yeah, I was going to say, similar to something Tom alluded to, that I wonder if there are important constructs in psychology that you think have not gotten as explicitly into behavioral economics as could be. So two candidates would be attention, although obviously implicitly attention has a lot to do with good design and nudges and user interface. And another is emotion, which I don't think you have worked on very directly.
Yeah, George has.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, do you think these are, anyway?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's a good embellishment on Tom's stuff. I've sometimes said that behavioral economics should just really be called Kahneman and Tversky economics, because we haven't, and nudge, we have to add Cialdini, but it has, and Kurt Lewin. But it's not that there are, the whole repertoire has not been applied. Now, one of the reasons for that is that psychologists have not been that interested in getting involved. That's why Bob wrote his famous breakup letter, because he felt like doing applied stuff wasn't getting the kind of reception that he thought it should. I don't know whether that's changing. It certainly is in business schools. But my impression is that it's not in psychology departments. So I don't know where, I mean, certainly grad students could read more broadly in psychology. And, you know, my advice is always to try and write the first paper on some topic, not the 10th. At one point, you and I tried to put a ban on papers on the ultimatum game, and there probably only have been 1,000 since we tried to implement that ban. I've suggested a ban on any papers with text messages. That's not going to work either. So there are good ideas out there that nobody's thought of, and they're hiding in the psychology literature, even in JPSP. You just have to get past the mediation analysis, and they're in there.
Great. Okay. All right. Well, I want to thank Richard for this conversation, and you survived it.
I did. Thanks.
It's a miracle.